Okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll call the committee of the whole meeting to order. Thank you. I'll ask, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest on any of the agenda items from any of the members? Seeing none. Business arising from the minutes. Staff was not aware. Is there anything from the minutes that anybody has? None? Very good. In the essence of time, we're kind of disputing, but I believe I see a thumbs up in the back there from Mr. Shorey. That will efficiently move on and not keeping you waiting at the back of the room. David Shorley, Executive Director of Georgian College, is with us here, and a couple of his students. So good morning, David. Yes, you do.
Button. Okay, green go. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I do have colleagues and friends with me in tow this morning. I'm going to say a couple words, but I know typically speaking, we would submit something to a package, and this is not the intent of today. The intent today is to simply give thanks, to give words of thanks and reflection. I've been in the role of executive director for our Owen Sound campus for about 18 months now. And in that time, the amount that we've had the opportunity to work with Grey County Council and staff, it's been notable. I mean, this is a special asset that we have in our region, the campus just up the road here, that has done a lot in terms of regional capacity building, but then more broadly, the impact on our global markets, in particular, when we think about our marine program. Recently, just in the last month, the Georgian College Student Association, or GCSA, recognized Grey County as the Partner of the Year, Community Partner of the Year, and it was students that selected that. We were able to have Kim with us at that time to be able to present, but it felt important at that juncture to come here today to share similar reflections to all of you. So I wanted to emphasize, we're not coming here with an ask. And we are coming here with thanks, and that is it, right? We're hoping to give thanks. There's been a long list of ways in which Grey County Council and staff have been very supportive to us. More recently, when we take a look at just the last year, significant contribution as related to renovations to our health and wellness wing. We were able to get our Honors Bachelor of Science in Nursing program up and running in September. And it's been our practical nursing program, PSW program, police foundations, and a number of community groups that have actually benefited from that renovation. It had an immediate impact, immediate. We had that wall, there's a dividing wall at the end of our hallway between two classrooms installed on Labor Day Monday, and classes began in that room 8 a.m. Tuesday morning after Labor Day. It had an immediate impact. You had so much to do with that, so much to do with that. You've supported our students through transportation with the Grey Transit route more recently, and being able to support those students in getting to campus and getting away from campus while they're doing placements and practicums. They can actually get out into the region. Supporting international students by way of access to the Sydenham campus, but then by way of support funding for programming. You know, those are a couple examples, and that's just in the last calendar year. I mean, if we look further back, your support of our Marine Emergency Duty Center and the Center for Marine Training and Research has been significant. It's been ongoing, and it's had a sustained impact as well. So I could wax on, right? And for anyone who knows me, if you give me a microphone, it's a bit of a problem. So I'll stop, because really where I think the most value comes from today is hearing from the students that are directly benefiting from your support. And so I brought 3 students with me today. I should highlight too that Jen Boucher is also with us. Jen Boucher is just on Monday stepped into the International Student Coordinator role. And so she's directly responsible for supporting our international students and working very closely with Grey County staff to do so. But I have friends of mine, AJ, Madison, and Banks, and they are in marine navigation as well as practical nursing. And so they're coming with just a couple words to share with you who they are, bit of the impact, their story. And so I'll start with AJ, if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then we'll hand it off to Madison after that.
Hello, everybody. My name is AJ. I'm from Singapore, and this is actually like one of the best things I've done, I think. I'm the marine navigation program, and I came here 2 years ago because mainly of my grandfather. He taught here 20 years ago, and he said Georgian College is amazing and it has the support of Mighty Grey Council. So I was thinking, yeah, he's taught here, he has some experience here, so why not I take a go at it? And I've just come here to express my sincere thanks about how maybe your contributions have grown, made my experience grow much larger than I could ever experience, because I never see myself doing this if I was a kid. And especially the marine emergency duties, the really big simulator made it all so realistic that it's just made my life amazing. So I really like to thank every one of you, maybe to all your contributions, and thank you so much. I'd like to hand it over to Madison now.
Well, hello, my name is Madison Lindsay. I am from Meaford, so I'm very local. I came to Georgian because I want to stay local and I want to work at our hospital. And I came here to say thank you for your support on the new nursing wing. It has helped me greatly, especially for my co-ops, because of the new technology I got to use. I did experience the old wing versus the new wing, and it's a great difference. So thank you for all of that, and I'll hand it off to Banks.
Morning, Council. My name is Fale Bankole. I'm from Nigeria, and my experience with Georgian College and Owen Sound has been amazing so far. I can remember when I wanted to migrate down to study the program, and when I looked up the internet, the first thing that caught my attention was the marine simulator in Georgian College. And because like it was the biggest marine simulator in Canada at the time, off the internet, that brought my interest to Georgian College. And I just want to say a big thank you, because that's been the best decision I've made in my life. And like I've really grown so far since I came down from Nigeria to Canada to study this program. The marine simulator has been very helpful in this process. It has exposed me to a lot of experience that I would never have imagined to have gotten if I stayed back in Nigeria to pursue a program like this. And that's thanks to everyone in this room. So I want to say a very big thank you, and thank you for your support. I hope that we continue to gain from your support in the coming future, and thank you for being a blessing to Georgian College. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, look at this. Thank you. Thanks for that too. I just got a little emotional there. Sorry. This is the reason why we do this work, right? What I asked them to do is share a couple of reflections, and they did beautifully. Thank you to all three of you. Madison is the outgoing Georgian College Student Association president, and is going to be is keen to stay in the region. And is going to be working closely. She's going to be working in Grey County, and then these two gentlemen are both going to be getting their sea time in the spring. So you're going to be working with a company out of Quebec,
Called Degagné.
and he thinks going to the Arctic. We're not sure yet, though. And Banks, where are you going?
Lower Lakes.
Lower Lakes, to which there's a boat actually in the harbor right now from Lower Lakes. I believe that post-secondary can change lives. I think we've heard that from these three, and this is just a small sampling. So the ways in which you support Georgian College here and more broadly as an institution is meaningful. It can become a change engine, and it is a change engine for the region, and it has a more global impact. So with that, I want to just say thank you once again. That's what we wanted to come with today. We brought we have a new coat of arms that we updated to reflect our growth in health and wellness programming. So the fourth book has been added alongside reflections around our meaningful engagement and commitment to indigenization. And so we have a pin for each of you, along with a description of what is the significance of the imagery. And we also have a certificate from Georgian College and the Georgian College Student Association with your name on it. For those that are members of County Council, again, thanking you and acknowledging that the students selected you as Community Partner of the Year. So with that, we'll say thank you for the time, and I'm not sure if there are any questions or any follow-up you wanted to do.
Thanks so much, Dave. And it was such a wonderful experience to be at the students' dinner, the end of year dinner. The enthusiasm and the sense of camaraderie in that room was really amazing to see. What a wonderful group of people. And I just wish you all the best for the brightest of futures, all of you. You've worked hard, you've overcome a lot. And you're so brave to come here and talk to all of us. I think, kudos to all of you. That's wonderful. We're hoping that we can get a picture with the council members that are here and with all of you. So if we can arrange that, that'd be great. Katrina, can we prevail upon you to maybe take a picture? Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. All right. So will we ever just go up there and?
For the picture, where would you like us to go? Right in the middle? Sure. Okay. Thank you for that.
Just while you're sorting that out, I want to make two comments. Mr. Shorey most recently has been referring to the Georgian College as the Grey Bruce campus, which is really important because, as he's just talked about, busing people in, students coming from Meaford, it's not just an On Sound campus. It is in On Sound, but it's a Grey Bruce campus. And I think this is important to understand, that it's a regional campus, that it's providing power workers to Bruce Power. It's providing trades throughout Grey and Bruce, and it is a Grey Bruce campus. And I encourage them to continue to use that phrase as much as possible. For some of us that were at the Nuclear Innovation Institute Clean Energy Summit, there was a speaker there named Brock Dickinson that talked about demographics and Canada leading the world and attracting people from all over the world to live in Canada. And Georgian College is a leader in our community for attracting new Canadians and people from around the world and from around the country to the region. Our next challenge, I think, probably still is making sure that those students can get work placements here in Grey Bruce and don't have to go to Oshawa or Toronto or someplace down south. And that's certainly the important part of having the nursing program, full degree program here, is keeping the students here to do their full program, where they'll be able to work here in our region, in our hospitals. And that goes to all the trades. So that, I think that's our next frontier, is to try and make sure that the placements and the co-op programs and the job experience and trades and those types of things don't have to leave our region to get educated and continue to live here, even in the winter when they're not in their boats, to keep a home here in On Sound or in Grey and Bruce, I think is the next opportunity. So thank you very much, Dave, and to all the students.
Okay, thank you, Ian. So I'll ask County Council. I think we've kind of come up with the idea. We'll do it here in front of the podium. Is that good? Yeah, we can get everybody steered in. We'll let the two navigators from the Marine collect everybody in, because you are now herding cats. This isn't like docking a ship, boys. Okay.
There's Andrew back.
Okay. There's everybody back. Exciting stuff. Incredible. Okay. That's it for the pictures, for the first bit of pictures. Mr. McNabb, Heather Prescott is here to talk about our SOS, but other functions, and more so about the work that Heather has been doing and encouraging us to support or speak with the Ministry of Health about a situation within the community. Kevin, you want to introduce Heather?
Yes, good morning, Chair Eccles and County Council. We're here this morning because we're concerned about something that changed up April 1st in regards to clients that we see and also a lot of people in the community, changes to the uninsured person's health coverage. During COVID, they provided temporary funding to healthcare providers to provide care during this time. And as of April 1st, they'd stopped that coverage. So Heather is more well versed in this than I am. She is our clinical lead. She's a nurse practitioner. She works very closely with the clients we serve in SOS, people that are very vulnerable and may or may not have ID or a health card, which impacts them. And we just want to bring that concern forward and look for your support through the motion that's at the end of the presentation.
Before you leave, Kevin, we do have a motion or direction here, resolution. And what I'm going to ask is, can someone move that, and a mover and seconder to get it onto the floor? And then we'll go to Heather. Moved by Councillor Body, seconded by Councillor Keaveney. Okay, that's on the floor. Privilege.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just from a procedural point of view, this not being actually in a formal report, I'm wondering why a motion that appears as part of presentations and deputations is required to be moved and placed on the floor before County Council, before the report presented or before the presentation.
Madam Clerk, do you want to speak to that? Go ahead. Procedurally.
Thank you for the question. And just for the purposes of consistency, where with reports, the practice has been that the motion is put on the floor before staff make their presentation. In keeping with the same practice, this was the thought with this motion to be put on the floor first, and then the delegation and staff will make their presentation to follow.
Okay. Kevin, and we'll go with.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Council. Thank you so much for providing me this opportunity to speak today. This is my first time speaking at Council, and the likeness today has been so lovely, so many celebrations, happy birthday. I hate to end this way, but thank you so much for making it so welcoming for me today. As you know, I'm here representing SOS as the clinical lead. I am a nurse practitioner. I've been a nurse practitioner in this community for over 10 years now. I live and I work here, and I've always worked with unrostered or more vulnerable individuals in our community. So for those who aren't familiar with what SOS does, the Supportive Outreach Services is a project aimed at serving our most marginalized individuals in our community. We offer medical care, including addictions medicine, mental health and addiction support and services. We connect individuals with housing, social services, and mental health case management. We provide basic necessities such as socks, hygiene supplies, tents, and sleeping bags. But most importantly, we also offer hope and dignity and provide a voice to the voiceless. And that's why I'm here today. One of the most significant roles SOS plays is a quiet one. We support individuals with identification. Identification allows them to access permanent shelter, to get a bank account, and to draw funds required for tenant insurance, rent, medications, and pay fees such as those required to obtain an Ontario health card. While to some, getting legal identification in Ontario and a health card might seem like a simple visit to Ontario's Service Ontario, to many of our marginalized individuals who live with mental illness, substance use, be unsheltered or living rough without a permanent residence and proof thereof. Obtaining ID is arduous, frequently takes 3 or more months. While certified copies are frequently filed with OW and ODSP or social service agencies, original paper copies are frequently required. Out of province and out of country birth certificates are even more complicated to obtain. Obtaining a health card in Ontario requires 3 unique pieces of identification. Once obtained, persons who are unsheltered or living rough frequently have their IDs stolen. Additionally, sometimes they're discarded when tents and personal property are removed from encampment sites. As you may be aware, and as Kevin mentioned, in 2020, at the start of the COVID epidemic, the Ministry of Health introduced a measure to support our Ontario residents without provincial health coverage. It allowed hospitals and physicians to bill certain services provided to patients without a health card. Very quietly, as of April 1st, that program has ended. And it's unclear at this time about what the direct impact to persons accessing medically necessary care will be. Healthcare is a right. We assume there'll be a fee attached to some of these services, which will be a huge limitation for those who do not have accessible funds. We feel that there will be the most significant impact to these vulnerable populations that I work with of SOS, as well as those new immigrants, migrant workers, and racialized communities. Without access to funded healthcare services, uninsured individuals will be at risk of not receiving necessary medical care. This could lead to untreated illness, injury, and ultimately more serious health problems. When uninsured individuals don't receive preventative health care and early intervention, their health conditions may worsen. They might require even more expensive and more extensive medical interventions later on. This can ultimately increase healthcare costs for hospitals, emergency rooms, our EMS services, and government. Persons who use substances and persons who are unsheltered are at higher risk for infectious diseases and other health issues that can easily spread to others. If they are unable to access medical care, the risk of public health crises may increase. Our homelessness and addiction can already have significant social and economic impacts, such as job loss, poverty, and social exclusion. The lack of access to healthcare services may be exacerbated by these problems, making it even more challenging to overcome their circumstances. It's likely that access to critical service such as psychiatry, other specialists, withdrawal management services, and RAM, or rapid access to addictions medication, will not be possible without a valid health card going forward. So in summary, ending physician and hospital services for uninsured persons in Ontario would have serious consequences to our marginalized populations, including those who are unsheltered, individuals with mental health and substance use issues. It's important to ensure that all individuals have access to necessary medical care and prevent further health complications and public health concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Kim?
Thank you. And I know Kevin's got some final comments, but I wondered, Anne Marie, did Melissa want to speak at all to what's happening with our OW clients or any of the experience there? No, it's okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything prepared, but while Heather was speaking, I was just thinking an example is of the Forum fire that happened last May. I don't have the exact numbers, Kevin, you might know better, but let's say 20, however many people were affected, at least 20 of them lost all their ID and they had serious health and addiction issues. It took us months. And that was with very wraparound services where we did ID clinics every day for 2 weeks. If any of them walked into the office, we would help them. So I think, and they were covered because this program was going. So a local example like that, if something like that happened again, it would be really devastating. to those folks. So that's just an example.
Yep, and thanks Heather for that great presentation to tell the story of what this means. And what we're looking for is support is similar to what the Ontario Medical Association has put forward, as well as to reinstate this care and then to consult healthcare stakeholders to put a program in place to continue on with this type of care going forward. And look at a better solution for this to ensure healthcare for all. I believe that, you know, prevention is really where you need to be. You need to be upstream of care. You shouldn't be dealing with these concerns through an emergency department. They're already overwhelmed. That is not the place to be. It is to be treating people in prevention versus waiting till the emergency happens.
Okay. Thank you for that, Kevin and Heather. Any questions from any of the council? Here at this? No more clarification, pretty straightforward, the motion that's there. If there's no further questions, it's on the floor. I'll call. Question, all those in favor? Any opposed? Everybody on the screen, they got their hands down in time as well too. Thank you. I'll declare that carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, and hopefully we can, our letters going forward and influencing can help our provincial partners who are responsible for making this happen for healthcare for all as a given right or a constitutional right, I believe, in living in Canada and especially in Ontario. So thanks, Kevin. Heather, appreciate it. Mr. Mackey, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering what the distribution of this motion will be. You know, who will we be sending it to our MPs and to all the other lower tier municipalities or the other councils? How do we get some momentum behind this?
In the motion, it was to Ministry of Housing, Health, AMO. Do we need an addendum to that? Is that what you're suggesting, or?
I'm not sure if AIM will circulate all the members. Sorry, I'm not sure if AIM will circulates to all the member municipalities or whether that has to be a direction in our motion.
Thanks for that comment. And certainly, I think what's included in the resolution was to distribute this to AMO. And I think we could ask that be then more broadly distributed by AMO or brought to the attention of an upcoming AMO board meeting. So we'll include that when we send it along, that request. That's okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that'll clarify that. Councillor Breen, Barb?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Kim's comment, I'd be happy to send along the resolution or correspondence to the AMO board as the representative at the county caucus to get it on the next agenda.
Okay. Very good. All right, we're to, that's it for delegations and whatnot. Determination, consent agenda. We have a number of items in the consent agenda. Sarah didn't tell me exactly how many we have there, but we have quite a few. Yeah. Is there any in the consent agenda that we would like pulled? Or any further discussion or clarification? Seeing none, then I'll take a motion to receive the consent items. Moved by Councillor McKay, seconded by Councillor Dickert. To receive the consent items there. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. For anybody that's out there, I did see at the start of the meeting, Councillor McQueen was not with us, but he joined us partway through, and welcome this morning, Paul. Thank you. Items for discussion. Well, this can't be correct, is it? It's a plan of subdivision at Scott Taylor. It's not noon. Oh, that's right. It will be noon by the time he's done. Very good. Yes. All right. Yeah, he's a planner. They take years of schooling to, absorb this type of stuff. Scott. Yeah. Welcome this morning. There is the report CW 1723. Do we have a mover and seconder to put that on the floor? Councillor Charlton and Councillor Mackey. Thank you. Motion is moved and seconded. It's on the floor. Further comments on it, Mr. Taylor.
Great. Thank you, Chair Eccles and members of County Council. I'm thrilled to hear that I have over an hour of runway here so I can really settle in. But with that said, we'll move right into the report. So this report is based on some changes that were made, kind of sound like a broken record here, but based on some changes that were made through some recent provincial legislation updates. And more specifically in this particular case, Bill 23 was passed in late 2022, as everyone around the table knows. One of the changes in Bill 23 was to remove the requirement for planning authorities, whether that be a county or a municipality, to hold public meetings for plans of subdivision and plans of condominium. Throughout this discussion, we'll be using the two interchangeably because it's a very similar process under the Planning Act in terms of getting approvals. And so the province has always said in the past that the public consultation requirements in the Planning Act are the minimum standards for consultation, but municipalities and or developers can choose to go above that. So, in the old days, it used to be you need a minimum of one public meeting, but if you wanted to have multiple public meetings, or if the developer wanted to hold their own public open house, then sort of the more the merrier. The province has made a number of changes to the planning process over the past few years, and largely under the guise of speeding up the development approvals process and trying to make sure that we have a smooth pipeline of housing coming in to support the housing needs of the county and the province in this regard. And certainly as county staff, we want to be partners alongside the province in that. And we've identified a number of efficiencies that we can make to try to improve those processes and try to bring housing online more quickly. I will say that as part of these provincial changes, although the province changed the requirements for plans of subdivision and condominium, they didn't make any changes to the public consultation requirements for zoning bylaw amendments. So that's to say that if you have a new subdivision coming in your community and they require both a plan of subdivision application and a zoning amendment application, strictly speaking, under the new legislation, you would be required to hold a public meeting for the zoning, but you wouldn't be required to hold a public meeting for the subdivision, even if the two were going in tandem. I should clarify that this report does pertain to all municipalities in gray, with the exception of the City of Owen Sound, and that's because the City of Owen Sound is the approval authority for both plans of subdivision and condominium in the city. It's also important to note that the county did delegate the hosting of public meetings to our member municipalities back in 2007. And the discussions around that time, harkens back to a lot of the same is how can we make the process more efficient? And in many cases, those public meetings were being held alongside zoning public meetings. They were being held at local municipal councils or local municipal planning committees. So there was a thought that county council didn't need to be actively involved in the hosting of those public meetings, and staff like myself or others from our department would certainly still attend to answer any questions on behalf of the public or on behalf of municipal councils in that regard. So it brings us to the point of where we are today in terms of if the province has said we don't need to have public meetings, do we still want to have public meetings? Do we collectively as staff and council still see merit in this process and collecting feedback from the public? Although they removed the requirement for public meetings, they didn't remove the requirement to still consult the public, to answer questions from the public, and to accept public comments on subdivision applications. The public, as of a few years ago, can no longer appeal plans of subdivision or plans of condominium, but it doesn't mean that their feedback isn't still welcomed and a necessary part of the process in that regard. As I said, in many cases, we still have zoning amendment public meetings, or we still have zoning amendments associated with the subdivisions or condominiums. So in those cases, we'd still be having those public meetings anyway. So I guess the question becomes, where you have a zoning amendment public meeting, is it really any different to have a few extra sentences at the beginning of the meeting to say, hey, this is a public meeting for a zoning amendment and a plan of subdivision, we'd welcome your feedback. In those instances where you don't have an associated zoning amendment, if a municipal council were to proceed with a public meeting, it would go on its own and not as a part of any other public meetings in that regard. We do see merit in continuing on with this process. We note that the county did delegate the hosting of public meetings, so ultimately it's a municipal decision. But we have had some developers asking us, what's your thoughts? Are you going to be having a public meeting for this application? Do you think your councils are going to want to hear? And it might be a career limiting move to try to speak on behalf of either county council or municipal councils. But the read I get from a number of the politicians I've spoken to is that they still see merit and they still see the need in having people be able to stand up and ask questions and or voice their concerns or support for an application as large as a plan of subdivision in their communities. We see some risks associated if we don't continue forward with the public meetings. In some cases, there might be a loss of trust or transparency with respect to the public's opinion of municipal and county governments. And in other cases, what it might mean is we might not hear that feedback early in the process when we can still meaningfully incorporate the comments into the process. And instead, it might come through last minute deputation requests, either at your municipal councils or county council tables. So as staff, we are recommending to our municipalities and to county council that we consider moving forward with continued public meetings. We don't think it should slow down the process much in terms of still having those efficient planning application processes to get to housing online more quickly. We do, however, think there's room for education, and we think there's room for education at both the staff and the council level with respect to the tone of these public meetings and what we're actually asking for the public's opinion on. You'll see on that slide, and they're covered in the report, there's lots of common questions that we hear at many public meetings. Why is the density so high? In some cases, we get accusations of the developer being greedy and just trying to squeeze as many lots in as possible. What some members of the public might not know is the density is so high because that's what we've asked for. That's what we need across our communities to provide that full spectrum of housing. There's other comments about the types of housing in terms of townhouses or semi-detached units. What will the houses look like? We had one public meeting not so long ago where a developer put up a graphic and it was just sort of an artist sketch of what the houses might look like. And I think it had red doors on each house, and people stood up and said, well, listen, I don't think red doors will fit in our community. That's not the kind of housing we're looking for. And respectfully to the public, that's not what we're here today to talk about. We don't really have any control over what color somebody paints their door. There's other things we want your feedback on rather than the color of the door. We hear comments on we prefer cul-de-sacs. We don't want our street connected to this other street because there'll be more traffic. And again, there's room for education there in terms of our transportation departments and our municipal public works departments on why staff might be pushing for a connected street network here versus cul-de-sacs. We hear lots of comments on how will this impact my property values? And we've said over and over, but simply put, property values aren't something we can factor into our planning recommendations in that regard. No doubt, certainly understand why somebody would have that first and foremost in your mind. Your house for most people is your largest investment and you want to protect that investment. But simply put, it's not something we can factor into our decision making. The other comment we get, sadly, all too frequently is speculations on the type of people that might be living in this condominium building or in these townhouses. And simply put, those are comments as staff and you as municipal leaders, we simply need to shut down right away. There's no room for those at our public meetings. And Ontario has put out documents to suggest that that's a human rights issue. That's not someone's opinion on this plan of subdivision. So we think getting out front of this, we can do a better job of working with our communication staff, working with your municipalities, both planning staff and communication staff, to better frame those public meetings, to make them more beneficial discussions. Simply put, if you're a member of the public and you get a letter in the mail saying, come to this meeting Thursday night at 7 and give us your thoughts on the plan of subdivision that's being proposed, you're not told anything about what kinds of feedback are useful versus what kinds of feedback might not be useful. And so all too often we have people coming to a public meeting that are nice enough to share their evening with us. They've taken that time to learn and be invested. But the very first comment out of some of the mouths that we hear is, we don't want to see development on these lands. And quite frankly, we can understand why that might be someone's position, particularly if they're living beside a large open field, so to speak. But when the developer bought lands that were designated in your municipal official plan, designated in the county official plan, and zoned for development, it's not fair that the starting point is them having to stand in front of a room full of people and defend why they're choosing to develop these lands that we've said are developable. And so I think there's more room that we can have there to educate the public on the land use permissions that are already in effect, and therefore the types of comments that might be useful. We're certainly not looking to short circuit discussion. There's lots of valuable feedback we can still get at these public meetings, but we want to frame those conversations to make sure that we're not getting any inappropriate comments that might get into slanderous territory or infringing on human rights. But also to make sure that we're still having civil discussions and civil discourse. We've seen lots of examples in the news lately where quite frankly meetings went off the rails, and we want to better frame these discussions to help get to productive results in that regard. We don't want to necessarily put all of our residential subdivision developers on the hot seat of having to defend why they're choosing to develop this property, when in fact, this is the very type of development that we're seeking across the county and across the province to ease our housing needs. So we think there can be a bit of a planning 101. This could happen maybe in meeting notices, it can happen online, or it can even happen as presentations at the beginning of the public meeting. Why is the developer proposing so many units? Well, simply put, we've asked for a minimum density of X number of units per hectare, depending on the community. Pointing out the fact that the lands in some cases, as I said, have been designated and zoned for development. So the starting point can't be, we want to see no development. These subdivision public meetings aren't meant to be referendums on development. They're meant to be a dialogue on the type of development being proposed on this property. We also want to get across the point that compatible does not mean the same as. So if you live in a neighborhood that has largely single detached dwellings, it doesn't mean that having some townhouses or some semi-detached units down your street is necessarily going to be incompatible. Generally speaking, people live well beside each other, and it doesn't really matter with the types of development largely that we see in Grey County, whether it's a townhouse, a single detached house, or a semi. We're not seeing high rises here necessarily that are going to force people to live in shadow. So we think there's some more messaging around compatibility in that regard. And then we think it leads to putting out some answers to frequently asked questions. One of the questions that we got recently at a public meeting, which threw me for a loop, was, is this growth needed in our community? Do we need more houses? And I tend to be, I guess, involved in planning circles and these council discussions where we talk about, we need more housing, we need more housing, we need more housing. So it was curious to me that we would hear members of the public openly questioning whether or not we need housing in our community. We can answer some of those questions about property values and tax rates. One of the interesting things, Town of Blue Mountains did a lot of work as part of their official plan review to look at the impacts on the local tax levy based on different types of residential development. And I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone around the table here today, but the medium and higher density development fared better from a tax perspective than using large amounts of land for single detached dwellings. And certainly in terms of what you have to pay for through your municipal tax levies, in terms of the infrastructure and the different community assets, then there's a real benefit to looking at some different types of residential development in that regard. And certainly we've had some very open discussions with certain members of the public that had concerns over that. And will development in this area increase my taxes? Are we going to need to pay for all these additional services? And in some cases, the answer is you know, it could. And if we're not making wise investments in our infrastructure and corresponding investments in our land use planning, then it could impact those tax levies down the road. But if we provide for this range of housing and more medium and higher density housing, then that comes closer to breaking even than most other forms of residential development in that regard. We can also provide more education on some of the standard concerns that we hear, and I don't mean to minimize them, but the environment is always one of the biggest comments and concerns we hear. And so we can educate people around these environmental impact studies that are done in support of applications, and also educate people on the review that takes place at the municipal and county levels to double check those environmental studies in that regard. There's some very interesting stuff put on that Wellington County has done with respect to concerns about construction noise. They've got some very frank comments on their website to say, yes, there's going to be noise. This will be a temporary condition, but we need more housing, and in some cases we need more infrastructure, and this will result in more noise in the short term in your community. It will result in some disruption. We'll do everything we can as county and municipal governments to minimize that, and we can look at the construction routes for the heavy trucks and the traffic in that regard. But we don't need to sugarcoat things. There will be some disruption there, but we know that housing is an important piece of social infrastructure that we need across our community. So just as we are tolerant when we have bridge repairs and road repairs and water and sewer pipe repairs in that regard, we need to think about housing as a form of infrastructure in that regard as well. And then finally, as we get into these meetings, we need to give the public reasonable expectations of what we're actually seeking input on. And again, we're not starting with the point of, do you want to see development here or not? We might be looking at the proposed ratio of housing in a development. We might be looking at the layout. Some members of the public might be able to inform us about current traffic patterns, whether it be vehicular or whether it be where people choose to walk or explore in their neighborhood. There can be comments about what types of landscaping or fencing or parkland is needed in those communities. Certainly the people living in an area know best about some of the needs in the community in that regard. We could ask the questions about whether or not there's anything missing in the development. We've heard in the past that some people wanted to see more amenity space, more parklands. We've heard people say things like, it'd be great to have a little cafe or corner store to walk to, or various things like that. So those are questions that in my mind are all fair game. And first and foremost, or not first and foremost, we're also there to answer any questions. The planning process is confusing. It can be worrying when you're looking at change in your community. So what can we do to ease those concerns and answer some of those questions? And so we really think, and I maybe have my rose colored glasses on here. We really think that we can work with your municipal staff and work with our own county staff to better provide some upfront education materials on this, and have some of these frank discussions, and maybe even have some of these training sessions with municipal councils and staff to really fine tune these meetings and fine tune the questions we're asking for there. So with that, our staff recommendation is that this report be received, it be shared with member municipalities. We have had some discussions with planners across the county on this, and that we're recommending that municipalities still consider holding public meetings for subdivisions and condominium, and that staff be directed to work with municipal staff and others to further refine this process and to look at making these meetings I don't want to say more efficient, but a safer space to hear community dialogue in that regard without getting into territory that's risky there. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair and happily take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from Mr. Taylor? Councillor Mackey. Scott?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Scott, thanks very much for this report. I think you hit the mark on it. Certainly in my experience, some of these planning meetings can be like a public stoning, it feels like. And, you know, if you can help the chairs of that through some training, that would be, you know, very helpful. You know, certainly we want input, but it needs to be the correct input. And, you know, as you spoke through your presentation, some of the information we get, you know, is human rights violations, and but I think we all need to have more education on what we can shut down and what we shouldn't shut down. So I would certainly be the first one to sign up for any training that the or your department may put on. So thanks again.
Councillor DeBreen, Barb?
Thank you through you to Scott. Thank you very much. This was, I actually read it a couple of times. You answered the question. One of my concerns was if the province is saying we don't have to have the public meeting, can the developer hold us to that? Or could we land ourselves into hot water if we did require it? So you did answer that into the legal and legislated requirements. What I do support fully is that we continue the engagement with the public and encourage the developers to hold as many, open houses or opportunities for them to have dialogue. I love the idea of having that education sheet. I thought it was really helpful. I don't really have a question, Mr. Chair. I just really found it super helpful.
Through you, Chair Eccles, thank you for your comments, both Councillor Mackey and Councillor DeBreen. You raise a good point, Councillor DeBreen, with respect to if a developer is coming in with the expectations that there be no public meetings held. And we have had some developers say, even if you hold a public meeting, do I need to show up? And our response to staff from a non-legal perspective is, well, we can't force you to be there, but we'd certainly love it if you could be there and help answer questions and help provide that face to the community. And we've got some wonderful developers in our community. We've been to many public meetings where somebody raised a very specific concern and the developer said, come see me after the meeting, or let's go grab a coffee together and talk about this. I think we can work this out. So I don't in any way want to paint our development community in a negative light. They're trying to do their best. But I also want to set everybody up for success. And we have had some developers that have held their own meetings and their own open houses. And I think in some cases, they've come away very discouraged from that. There was a recent meeting where a developer tried to do that. And the very first question on the floor was, in your 20-year career, have you ever worked on a more damaging development? And if that's the very first word out of the mouths of the community members, that's tough to recover from. And that's tough to, for that developer or for anyone to want to put themselves on that podium or dais or whatever else to be in front of that crowd. So how can we work to change this conversation a little bit? And I'm certainly not deluded to the fact that, simply by educating the public further, we're not going to erase some of these concerns. Change is tough, change is difficult, but I think we can reframe the need and reframe the discussion in a way that might reach some people, but not all people.
Councillor McKeven, Shirley, birthday girl.
Thank you, Chair Eccles, and I just want to thank you, Scott, for this report, because I do believe this education will be really helpful. We've seen in Meaford, and I'm sure every community is the same, that many of our residents don't want to accept change, even though they recognize housing is needed. Of course, they don't want it in their own communities. And I think there's an opportunity here to really improve the relationships between the neighborhoods and the developers. I mean, we've had a developer take themselves to the OLT because they knew that a public meeting was not going to go well. So they just chose to not go down that road and just take themselves to the tribunal. So it would be really wonderful if we could all work together and try to avoid those circumstances as much as possible. So we're sure open for all the education you can provide in our community. Scott, thank you.
Councillor Kentner, Ross.
I'll just add to that. I don't know how long it will take to get this script into the hands of those who have to chair these meetings, but I will use this as a template at my next meeting because we really need that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Eccles. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Keebner and Councillor Kentner. Yeah, and that's exactly what we want to empower each of you to do. chairing a meeting is not an easy thing. You're put on the hot seat, and that's a very difficult position to be in. So the more staff can empower you and to give you some canned answers or some scripted comments you can make, hopefully makes your job a little easier. The one thing I'll say further is, should Committee of the Whole support this recommendation today, we would like to share it to each of our 9 member municipalities. It might be something you choose to discuss at your municipal council tables as to whether or not you're going to have a policy on these public meetings, such that your staff, when they're asked the question from a developer, hey, listen, is the subdivision going to require a public meeting or not, has something to rely on. Right now, staff in many cases have been saying, well, we think our council would want one, but if you can provide that direction to your staff, either one way or the other, it might make their jobs a little easier in that regard.
Anything further? This work with gravel pit applications too?
I think there is still some education that's needed on all of our planning processes, and gravel pit and quarry applications are almost always contentious, even though there's a resource, it's a resource that we need in our community. And so I think there's some further framing of those discussions that can happen. It's a little different because typically a gravel pit would require a zoning amendment, which requires a public meeting, and it also requires an open house under the Aggregate Resources Act. But I think there's room for staff to work with council to try to set those discussions up as productive as possible. But we know that, you know, things like gravel pits are going to be contentious, and they're going to bring out a lot of emotions.
Okay. No further discussion. I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? Any opposed? That is carried. Okay. Before we keep taking from the water hose, do we want to take a little break? Yeah, I can see a few people shaking their head that teacups need to be refilled and whatnot. You can take a breath. We'll order lunch to be delayed because you're back up again, Scott. Fine, we'll stand. Let's be back at 25 after. Okay, thank you. Let's call the meeting back to order. We're starting back to recording. Thank you, everybody. Next report down on the agenda B, planning report 11/23. Scott, thank you very much. We have a motion there, a resolution regarding the University of Guelph, this advancing additional resident units in Grey County and work from the university. Do we have a mover to put that on the floor? Councillor Patterson, thank you. Councillor Kentner, thank you. On the floor, looking for any further comments from your extensive written report. Now you'll give us the verbal additionals, right? Scott, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Eccles. And I'm only here today because Becky Hillier, who did all the heavy lifting on this project, is actually in an Ontario Land Tribunal hearing. So I'd much rather be in council than an Ontario Land Tribunal hearing. I'm also here because of the fantastic partnership and the fantastic work that these three students, Megan, Rebecca, and Mohammed, from the University of Guelph did on the county's behalf. And Hiba led the project, or Becky led the project on behalf of county staff. But these three wonderful students from the University of Guelph, similar to our Jordan students that were here today, really did a lot of work and had a great keen interest in our community and exploring this topic further. And we're so thankful to be able to work with institutions like the University of Guelph, who offer these research opportunities to us and who also give the students some real world examples in that regard. So committee may recall that we had the introductory report earlier this year to introduce the project about researching additional residential units a little further across the county. We see lots of benefit to such units in terms of helping us meet our housing needs going forward. It also ties in very nicely to our climate change action plan, our age-friendly community strategy, and our ongoing housing action plan in that regard. And so with respect to the work that the students did, they did a lot of research across Canada and across North America and other jurisdictions on what other levels of government and municipalities were doing with respect to additional residential units. They also had a series of in-depth interviews with municipal planners and building officials and some private planners in that regard to understand the challenges on the ground. What are your building officials hearing when people are coming in for permits? What are your planners hearing or experiencing when people are trying to navigate the application system and hopefully get one of these additional residential units, whether it's as a basement apartment or as a detached unit. And so the students have made a series of recommendations, and I realize not everyone online might be able to see this, but they put together this wonderful report that's linked to in the county staff report in that regard. But some of the highlights of the recommendations they've included is in terms of streamlining policies and processes. Are there those instances at the municipal level where we don't need any applications? We don't need a zoning bylaw amendment application, and somebody can simply come in and apply for a building permit in that regard. Where we do need a planning application, what can we do to demystify the process or simplify the process for people so that it isn't a daunting task? It isn't something that would scare them away from otherwise installing an additional residential unit. Similar to the education and the discussion we just had on the subdivisions, can we put together some frequently asked questions and some process maps to help people navigate that process, even if it's just applying for a building permit? Are there resources that we can share with respect to people that might be looking to become landlords for the first time, navigating things like the Residential Tenancies Act, and what can we provide there that helps make it easier for people? Other municipalities have had online platforms or software to help people searching for units, and so if you're looking for a place to rent, you might be able to be linked up to some of these people that have these additional residential units. For the detached units, think of a unit in the backyard, or what some people would consider a tiny home, not the ones on wheels, but the ones that are a little more permanent. Are there pre-approved models that we're aware of and that are kind of plug and play as soon as you connect to hydro and services in that regard, that we can work with our building officials on to recommend some of those units that might be easier access for people, and then are there online tools that will make it easier for people in terms of these processes? We also think there's further room to engage the builders in this regard. Anecdotally, we've heard from some home builders that if someone's coming in and building a new single detached unit, they automatically rough in the plumbing or that side entrance, such that if they want that additional residential unit in the future, it's easier. We know that it's easier at the primary build level rather than having to retrofit a home after the fact. So, can we engage the building community to be presenting these options to their customers who may not have otherwise thought of putting in an additional residential unit? Are there further not-for-profit partnerships that we could strike up with some of the not-for-profits maybe that Anne Marie and her team deal with on a regular basis? And then the other recommendation there was with respect to incentives. So are there county level grants or municipal community improvement plans or financial incentives that we could offer to people who might be interested in installing some of these units? So with this, we are recommending that Committee of the Whole receive this report, that we share it with member municipalities, and that we continue to build off the students' work, in addition to some of the work that our own staff in both the community services and planning departments have done to aid municipalities in being able to offer and promote these additional residential units further, updating official plans, updating zoning bylaws, and providing some of those other materials like the frequently asked questions or the process maps or various other things. So that's just a very high level summary. But again, I just really want to thank the University of Guelph and these three particular students for all their work on this project, and certainly be happy to take any questions on their behalf from council today.
Thank you very much, Scott. Questions? Councillor Body, Ian.
Thank you very much. I'm maybe throwing a pitch at you that's a little bit off the plate, but I have talked to a developer that I think represents all developers in a sense. It's not specific to that developer, talking about the conflict between federal funding for affordable, attainable CMHC funding coming through and getting the mortgage registered in first priority versus I think it's their development charges. And it's got caught up that it's not working. And have we come up with a solution, or can we come up with a solution, or where are we at on that?
So I'll take a stab at that one, and maybe Randy can jump in and correct me where I go astray here. So we have our county programs with respect to development charge exemption agreements. And as Councillor Body pointed out, we have had some concerns from some developers in that regard. More specifically with respect to these additional residential units, through changes in Bill 23 and our own county bylaws in that, or county development charges in that regard, in most cases, these additional residential units would simply be exempt. So, and again, Randy or Mary Lou can jump in if I'm going astray here, but I don't believe a number of these units would necessarily need those agreements. They're not conditional on that exemption, but Randy, I don't know if anything further.
Further through you, Mr. Chair, and to Councillor Body's question, there was a previous report that staff brought forward with respect to this particular topic matter in terms of some of the challenges that we're seeing with respect to mortgage financing associated with CMHC and the concerns around the whole conditional development charge exemptions that the county offers through a program currently. We will be bringing forward a staff report to this council based on obviously some of the Bill 23 changes. We're still waiting for some information to come out from the province in terms of what the affordable thresholds are with respect to that, as well as the definition of attainable housing. With respect to those matters, once we have those details, what the legislation requires is that that developers enter into agreements with municipalities with respect to those. So we're going to see more agreements throughout the province when it comes to development charges for pretty much most developments that at least meet those thresholds. And again, we're not sure what those thresholds will look like. This we think beyond just CMHC and other mortgage and lenders will need to, I guess, consider going forward how they approach these things when there's agreements that will be likely on title throughout the province that are very similar to the current program that the county offers through conditional DC exemptions for purpose-built rental housing units. This would not only apply to purpose-built rental housing units, but also ownership housing units as well, if they meet those thresholds. So we're going to see more of these types of agreements. It's something that we're still working with CMHC and others in terms of trying to understand the concerns around what the perceived risk is with respect to these agreements. But I think it's something that they're going to have to look at potentially changing current process in terms of considering these, because there's going to be more of these agreements associated with these developments on a go-forward basis throughout the province of Ontario. Like I said, we will be bringing back a report forward to this council in terms of some thoughts around what this current program looks like in light of the changes that are being proposed through the Bill 23 legislative changes to the Development Charges Act, and we'll of course want to get council's direction and feedback in terms of where we go with that current program, if there's any changes required to that program in light of the changes to the Development Charges Act. But that's just a quick update in terms of where we're at with respect to that particular matter.
Thanks, Randy. Go ahead, Ian.
Thank you. So just to follow up, or maybe to summarize, where we've maybe been in one of the individual municipalities giving exemptions or conditional exemptions, now through the provincial legislation, it's going to be all of them. So CMHC is either going to give out no money in a sense, or else they're going to have to adjust. Is that basically a good summary? As we go forward, I wonder, just to finish the thought, if this still isn't working, if you kind of give us guidance at some point of when we need to go lobbying at AMO or at the ministry to get it fixed. Thanks.
Madam CEO, Kim.
And just to follow up on the great remarks by Randy, we did speak with our MP and he was supportive of us and assisted us with, communicating with CMHC at the highest level. We didn't get the response that we had hoped to get from them. And this, it all just seems to come down to a perception of risk and whether there's risk involved to either CMHC from a landing point about who has priority over who. And I think, again, the municipalities in the county are also going to have to think about where they see risk or what risk they're willing to bear and how to kind of get a sense of what that looks like. How much risk is there here really? And what should we be concerned with? So we'll try to address some of these things. But it does feel in this particular instance like we've been kind of caught. And unfortunately, a developer who's trying to do good work and the work that our policies say you should be doing is, kind of being hamstrung for doing that. So hopefully we'll be able to, with more eyes on this, come to a better resolution.
Okay, anything further on this one? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Scott. Oh, this is just before lunch and this will really make your appetite, won't it? Tax policy. Incredibly emotional topic. Welcome this morning, Mary Lou. And so we have one coming on here, report from Ms. Spicer on the tax policy. Can I have a motion to move that? And I'm looking, Councillor Hutchison and Councillor Mattersoff. Moved and seconded. The floor is yours, Mary Lou.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say it's an odd time when I may be holding you up from lunch. Unless it's budget day.
There are times when you do hold us up for lunch, but yeah, we'll let it go for today, as long as it's not more than 5 minutes past 12, okay? You've been warned. Thank you.
I will set my clock. So Grey County, as the upper tier municipality, is responsible for tax policy. And it's required to be set within the year. We can't pass it in advance of the year. Because you should be making your tax policy decisions based on the final return to roll, which comes at the end of December. And it is also approved by bylaw. Owen Sound, as a former separated city, is responsible for setting their own tax policy. And their report was approved by City Council on March 27th. So this report recommends reducing the tax ratio for the multi-res class from 1.441197 to 1.330900, which is a quarter movement to equalize the treatment of all residential classes. And it would also maintain the other ratios and subclass reductions as the same used in 2022. So the tax rate bylaw will be presented at the May 11th meeting so that member municipalities can pass their own bylaws and prepare for tax billing. We have Peter Fries attending the meeting virtually, and I'll ask him to speak to any questions that I require assistance answering or to offer additional thoughts that he feels are helpful. Peter, as a reminder, provided a property tax education session on February 9th to both upper and lower tier councils as well as staff. In addition to that, we had a call with your treasury staff to discuss this year's tax policy and the implications of any changes that are made. We then confirmed by email with your treasurers that there is support for the tax policy before you today. So as I mentioned previously, the recommendation is to leave the ratios, subclass discounts, and tax structure the same as used in 2022 for 2023, with the exception of multi-res. So it's recommended we begin to lower that multi-res ratio by the quarter ratio to make it eventually equal with the residential and the new multi-residential classes. The other thing, it's important to know that this doesn't change the budget that you passed in any way. We still are required to raise from taxation $67,932,700. What it does impact is how the levies are distributed between the property tax classes and the municipalities. 2021 was to be the first year of a new assessment cycle, moving from the January 1st, 2016 values to January 1st, 2019. And of course, we all remember that as a result of COVID, that was paused, and we are unaware at this time of when the next assessment cycle will take place. Table 1 on page 49 shows the growth in 2022. This amount was taken into consideration in the 2023 budget, and the end result was a levy increase of $993,600 after growth of 1.48%. Table 2 on page 50 shows both the county and member municipality growth. This is increase in revenue from new or newly improved properties. So it's important to remember that it's not an increase from existing taxpayers. So the tax ratios affect the distribution of the levy and the amount shared by each class. So municipalities can alter ratios. There are two options. We either maintain the prior years or we establish ratios that are closer to or fall within the provincial range of fairness. Residential has a ratio of 1, and that's what all the other classes are measured against. And multi-res having currently a ratio of 1.441197 and reducing it by 7.65%, which is a quarter movement. And that will eventually get us to the new multi-res ratio of 1. So we're making this recommendation with consideration of the following things. The province has indicated it's looking at all options for the elimination of the multi-residential rate differential. So it makes sense to move toward resolving this inequity before we're told that we're going to have to. And it is an inequity if you own a property and I own a property and they were built in different years and you're paying more property tax than I am. It just makes sense. Owen Sound, which is previously mentioned, is responsible for their own policy. So they've already made their movement and they've made a quarter reduction as well on their ratio. So it's important for Owen Sound and the county to be in sync so that this movement, that the property owners receive the intended benefit. As reassessment was paused, we can begin this movement without complication of the shifts that may be present in a reassessment or a phase-in year. Table 7 on page 54 shows the 2022 actual ratios and the 2023 recommended, showing again the only recommended change is to multi-res. When I look at page 56 on table 8, it shows that there's a $45,865 reduction in multi-res and a $50,754 reduction to Owen Sound requisition for a total reduction of $96,619. As residential is the largest tax class, it picks up the bulk of the redistribution. Table 9 on page 56 shows the shift between municipalities, with Hanover, Owen Sound, and to a small extent, Meaford receiving reductions. And it should be noted that more than half the county's multi-residential assessment is located within Owen Sound. So that's why Owen Sound sees the largest reduction. Table 11 on pages 57 and 58 shows how the levy increase of the $981,870 is distributed between the tax classes. And then table 12 shows the apportionment by member municipality. We have information on page 59 that's for general interest. In 2021, we did the tax relief for elderly and disabled program, and that's administered by your member municipalities as that's where the property taxes are levied and collected. When you have any reductions, then they're passed on to the county when you forward your supplementary or levy payments. The report mentions business class tax capping. The last of the properties that were eligible for capping was in 2020, and so therefore that relief program ended. So by adopting the recommendations contained in this report, a residential property with a median assessed value of $285,000, which is the number that we were looking at in our budget documents, will pay $1,083.52 in county tax. And that's an increase of $1.60 from what was presented in the 2023 budget. And I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Very well, very well done. Because I'm totally confused. So you've done your job very well. Any questions for Mary Lou on any of those shifts that are going to take place because of this? Councillor Mackey, Scott?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mary Lou, for the report. It's not a question on the actual shift in the assessment. The question is, I guess, the impact related. Any idea, you mentioned in the report, the assessment cycle starting again, is that a Ministry of Finance decision or is it an impact decision? Where's the delays coming from in starting the new reassessment?
That's a provincial decision.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Greg, Scott?
Thank you, Chair Eccles. The only comment I would make on this is passing along a real benefit to a lot of individuals who rent. And I said this at the city when we made the move. We need to ensure that the reduction in property tax is passed along to the end user or the person that's renting. It's a real benefit that we are acknowledging here in this report, and there's a lot more room to move forward until we hit one. But it's inexcusable if multi-residential property owners or large corporations pocket this and do not pass it along, as we intend here today to see this passed along to people who are renting or who are to benefit. You can make your money in rent, but property taxes are to be collected and remitted. It's not property taxes are not to be a money maker for property owners. And I hope that it's the expectation of everyone around here to ensure that we consult and promote the benefits to people who should be experiencing the gains here that this policy shift or migration should experience for them. So that's my hope. Ensure that we as councillors discuss with people in the community and we learn of any instances where this benefit's not passed along as intended.
Thank you for that, Scott. But it's I think you well know too, it's difficult to make sure that does happen without a lot of peer pressure somewhere along the line to do that. One indication that I have, if I could speak from the chair, is they don't, where it comes is the shift, and as we've heard, and it's only $1.60 or give or take, but because of our high residential, it's pushed over to there. And with that aspect that the multi-res is getting a reduction in theirs, residential and any residential out there, single family that is in a rental spot, it's going up on that side, which in Grey County, we probably have a fair number of those single family dwelling units that are rented. So you wonder how much you gain by it, but I think in my mind, it's more, if the multi-res was built 5 years ago, it doesn't qualify, but the one that was built 2 years ago does. It just doesn't make sense not to have them together. So my support for it. All right. And I apologize for getting on a soapbox here and pushing these things. Mary Lou.
I was just going to ask if Peter had any comments. I know he's there online.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Through you, Chair, just to the comment that was made about passing on to tenants. Every year we work with the county and local staff to undertake an exercise which is addresses a local responsibility to issue notices where there are eligible tax decreases, and an eligible tax decrease on a qualifying multi-residential building is one that's net 2.49 above 2.49 year over year. Where that occurs in any year, where it has occurred in any year, notices are generated and sent to the landlords in late summer and each tenant unit later in the fall, indicating that there's a qualified reduction. That is required by the local municipalities, and that exercise has been ongoing for many, many years. I think in Grey County, we've had a couple instances where the ratio is moved, that it's triggered notices. Most year it returns an ineligible circumstance, but we do expect that notices will be triggered this year and tenants will receive those indicating a specific percentage of their rent that they're entitled to a reduction for. So that may answer or speak to the comment or the question.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Peter. More clarification on it because it is a complex issue when you start shifting here to there and how it trickles down and where it finally lands, what it's affected on the way down. Okay, anything else? Any other questions on this? And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Again, thank you very much, Mary Lou. And to all the people out there in the public, it's about the last thing to do before those second tax billing school out, now that the first ones are out there and being paid, thankfully, by everybody. Don't laugh too hard, Tara. Next, I think that's all that we have on the director reports. Closed session matters, I don't think we have any. Other business? Not that I'm aware. Notice of motion. We have anyone that has a notice of motion at this time? Then we're down to adjournment. And I'm looking online for a mover and a seconder. I'm going to take Miss Hope. She hasn't done. And Ms. Matrasoff, fully from the town of the Blue. We're turning out the lights. So obviously this meeting is over. All those in favor of adjournment? Wow. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. Really appreciate it.